Hey gals and guys, it's me, Phil Larson, and this is your motivational high five on perspectives. Let's do this. Welcome to the show where we are trying to get new perspectives on life, and this is the reason why I like to invite people to be guests on my show. If this is something that you want to do, reach out to me at phil@thestoryshop.tv. To find out more about the podcast, go to thestoryshop.tv/podcast, and let's get right into it. Have you ever experienced an incident where you know it to be true? In fact, you've played it and replayed it in your mind, and you can't begin to think it happened any differently. And you almost become obsessed with replaying it, almost to convince yourself that it did happen this way, right? That it happened a certain way. And I find that that's the case for me, in particular with painful events. And I make absolute judgments about this event based on my perspective. Well, this assumes that my perspective is the only perspective, that my perspective is truth, that I have covered all angles. But really, is that ever the case? Doesn't this make life out to be too simple? Things are either black or white, right or wrong, but really life is much more complicated than that. There is much more gray areas thrown in. From the same event, people can have different experiences, and from that, they gain different perspectives. There's a fairly well-known story from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Stephen was on a subway, and he was minding his own business, and so were other people. And all of a sudden, a father and his 2 children come on the subway. And on the subway, the children are destructive. They are fighting with each other. They're taking other people's papers and throwing them, and just being destructive. And the father seemed resigned, with his eyes closed, not even conscious of the events that were happening. And so Stephen, sitting next to this guy, talked to him and said, "Hey, can you do something about your children?" And the guy opened his eyes and became aware of the present, and he said, "Yeah, I guess I probably should do something about that." And he said, "Their mother died an hour ago, and I don't know what to do with it, and I don't think that they do either." And from the same event, now we are introduced a new perspective, and we find out that things really aren't what they seem. The French novelist Marcel Proust says this: "The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes." And I find this to be coming true in my own life, as, like I've said in a previous podcast, I'm wrestling with some resentments I've carried in my life. In particular, things that people have done to me either in my profession or in an opportunity to collaborate at one point, or just an off the side job here and there. And it's been a weird discovery lately to come to a realization that whenever someone has, in my perspective, wronged me, I find out later that some misfortune has happened to them. I realize I'm not that powerful. I'm not God, and I'm not a curse, but I was wondering, why is this happening? I was almost feeling a little bit like a curse. And then I had a dream where I met 2 of these people at a table, and I empathized with one of these guys where something has happened to him recently, and I said, I'm sorry about that. And then I looked across the table, and this other guy, just in the dream, had put on a lot of weight, and he looked sad, and I had compassion on him. And that next day, while I was out on my run, I remembered the dream, and then it hit me like a wall, a new perspective. I get to see these people be human. They are broken people struggling in their own lives like I am in mine, and I can offer compassion and empathy for these people that I kind of feel wronged by. Boy, this was a new perspective, and a timely one at that, and I'll explain why here in a second. But have you guys ever seen that picture? And this gives a good depiction of perspective of a cylinder where there's two light sources coming at a cylinder suspended in space, and one of the light sources is coming at the side of the cylinder, and what it does is it casts a rectangle up on the wall, and the other light source comes at the front of the cylinder, and it casts on the wall a circle. And from the same event, we get two perspectives. From the same object, we get a rectangle on the wall on one wall and a circle on the other. Recently, an old friend reached out to me, and I felt hurt by this friend. 4 years ago, I felt like a bridge was burnt that he decided to burn in our relationship. And yet, I am grateful for him being brave and reaching out in our time together last week as we gave our perspectives on what happened. And what I realized was I didn't know the whole story. And as he apologized for his part in it, and then shed light on a new perspective, casting a new image on the wall, I was able to have compassion and begin to allow into my head a new perspective. Now, it changes instantly, sure, the new perspective, but the gradual change is letting that affect what you've replayed in your mind for 4 years. I was thrown for a loop, and I told him that, and I'm still swirling a little bit because objects that I thought were one thing are realigning to become something else, and feels a little chaotic right now. It's really even hard for me to explain right now. The truth is, I'm in the process of gaining new perspectives, and it's not easy work because the events that made me believe one way cut deep. And maybe that's the case for you, and I would implore you to seek out new perspectives, but also go easy on yourself and allow yourself to grow into those new perspectives. Big changes in your brain and thought patterns take time, and we talk about that. And sometimes it's frustrating. You've grown accustomed to believing one thing for so long, and so a curveball it'll really surprise you sometimes. But don't let it get you stuck, and keep seeking out new eyes. And at the end of our 5 minutes, we invite new perspectives in our lives. We do this by finding a reflection of ourselves, and at some point today, saying this affirmation to ourselves. I can allow new perspectives in my life because what I want more than my perspective is truth. That doesn't mean that aspects of your perspective aren't true, but it's not the whole story. Seek, friends, the whole story. And maybe that requires you to return to the incident, to the pain, and seek out understanding and clarity from those involved and those who have different angles and different perspectives. And that is not an easy thing to do. But you can do it. It starts with you.